All right, well, let's get going, guys. My name is Joe Massey. I'm with Castle & Cooke Mortgage, and today we are talking about 21 strategies to help your clients win their offer in a competitive market. And so I'm curious to see if you guys are starting to see more competitive offers, because I am, and I'm curious what you guys are seeing out there. So what I always like to do is just call on each of you and learn what's your name, how long you've been in real estate, are you seeing competitive offers right now? And what would you like to learn today? So, Jerrod Paterson, your First Alliance title. Who are you? Who will
Yeah.
go first?
Well, guys, I'm Jerrod Paterson with First Alliance Title. I've been in the real estate world for over 30 years now. Started off at the ripe old age of 23 years old and was an agent for 22 years. And then came over to the title side about 5 years ago. So, I'm always looking to be a resource to agents, and I love I'm an accountability partner to some. I help with lists and things like that. I sit down and analyze your business and try to show you ways that you can grow your business, because I always have conversations where people have big goals, but they're not doing the things on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that's going to help them meet those goals. So let me sit down and help you figure out ways to meet your goals. So I would love to help you grow your business.
Well, let me go ahead and share my screen and then make sure that you guys are able to see that. So if I can get Jerrod, somebody give me a thumbs up that
Yeah,
you're able to see my screen. So again, my name
good.
is Joe Massey with Castle & Cooke Mortgage, and I've been a part of the mortgage business 22 years now. I started in 2002. And so do a lot of work with Jerrod at First Alliance Title, a lot of work with Andrew at First Alliance, lots of work with Your Castle Real Estate, Anita, and some other folks over there. And my job is to be a resource for you guys. And we do see a lot of competitive offers, and we are seeing this come back. You know, there was a period of about 6 months that properties were sitting a little bit longer and not necessarily as many competing offers. But I kind of think we are back to that competitive market, particularly for, the prime listings that are priced well, marketed well, and in really, really hot areas. So let's dive in here. Very first thing, everything in this presentation should be at the buyer's direction and is for their benefit, not for the real estate broker's benefit or for the lender's benefit. Now, I am not a real estate agent, so really important. I am a lender. I look at contracts all day long. I help a lot of our buyers get under contract in competitive situations, but very important, all of these strategies are trumped by the advice of your managing broker. So we're going to give you a lot of ideas today, lots of things that we have seen work, but you should always, always, always follow the advice of your managing broker. And some of these strategies, you may need to contact a real estate attorney. All right, some of these are going to involve additional provisions. Some of these are going to involve some other creative things. And if you need to contact a real estate attorney, you absolutely want to do that. And of course, maybe at your managing broker's direction. If they say you need an attorney to help you with this, make sure you're following that direction. All right, so let's start with step number one is the buyer interview. This is where you want to sit down with the buyer and really educate the buyers about the market. You want to cover with them trends booklets, showing stats, brokerage data, all sorts of information to share with them. Hey, this is a competitive market. There's headlines out there that say the market's slowing down, the market's cooling. There's headlines that say there's going to be a foreclosure boom, all sorts of things like that. But what you really want to do is spend time with the buyer and make sure they understand really what's going on in the market, and it may be more competitive than they think. So it's a really important step. And I know with the upcoming NAR rulings, meeting with that buyer and having that buyer agency signed prior to going out and looking at homes is going to be a really critical piece as well. So during this meeting, you really want to find out, what is the buyer able to be flexible on? Can they be flexible on price? Can they be flexible on closing timelines? Do they have lease pressure that they have to be out of a home at a certain time, right? Find out what are their must-haves on the terms of the contract and what are the things that they can be flexible on. And a question that I really like to ask is, are you able to operate within the realities of the current market? What I mean by that is the current market is competitive. There are multiple offers on multiple properties. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, are you comfortable paying a little bit over the list price? Or are you comfortable waiving your inspection? Are you comfortable waiving your appraisal? Are you not comfortable with those things? And you want to really talk with them and understand what are the details that they can be willing to change on. And then you want to go over the details related to that contract to buy and sell. So one thing that I really like about CTM is it can set up, or you can set up templates, right? So let's just say Jerrod is my real estate agent and I'm the buyer, and Jerrod can, in our initial meeting, pull up in CTM and go through all of the details of the contract, and he can ask me some things like, how do I want to be vested? Is it me plus a spouse, or is it just me? And he can cover a lot of the details. Now, the property information is going to be blank, right? Because we don't have a purchase or a property address yet. So that's going to be blank. Price is going to be blank because we don't have a purchase price yet. But we can go over a lot of the details and really get a clear understanding for the buyer of what's happening on the contract. So then when we find a property and we need to make an offer in an hour or 2 hours, you're not having to sit down and explain that entire contract. All we're talking about is purchase price, address, terms, right? So I think that's something that is really critical, is set up that template for that buyer and make sure they understand, the pertinent details during that initial interview. And then once you find the right property, it's pretty easy to plug in the details and send that over to the listing agent. So the next thing you want to have is a pre-approval. So if the buyers are using a loan, you want to get a pre-approval letter. And it's important to remember that pre-approval is better than a pre-qualification. So a pre-qualification is good, right? This is based on the client's credit report, and it's based on their verbal information. And so we can provide you a pre-qualification in about an hour, maybe even less, right? We do it right on that initial phone call with the client. But then we're going to ask for some written documents, paycheck stubs, tax returns, W-2s, bank statements, any pertinent information if they've ever been divorced or have they ever had a bankruptcy or foreclosure, anything like that. And once we receive that written information, we can completely underwrite that loan and upgrade that letter to a pre-approval letter, which is the best thing that you can get, right? Because now that is saying, hey, Mr. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we have completely underwritten this buyer. We've verified their income, their assets, their credit. The only things that are outstanding is just simply a purchase contract, the appraisal, and the title commitment. That makes it a heck of a lot further down the road versus somebody who's not even pre-qualified yet, or versus somebody who's only pre-qualified verbally. So I would encourage you, really focus on making sure your buyers are following that step to get pre-approved, because that is a big way that you can separate your offers from other offers in the market. Next thing, as you're looking at properties and you find one, call the listing broker. All right, and you want to find out all the details that you can from the listing broker, especially what items are important to the sellers. Do the sellers want maximum price, or are they willing to take a little bit lower price because they need to rent back the property for 50 days or 45 days? Do they want a longer closing because they're buying a new build and they want to make sure the property is finished before they close on the sale? Are they moving out of town in 2 weeks and they need to close immediately? Right? So a lot of times we all think that cash close in 10 days is the best offer. It may not be. I've actually had clients that write a 90-day contract in order to be flexible for the seller because the sellers didn't want to close in 10 days. So you want to have a conversation on this phone call and find out, Mr. and Mrs. Listing Broker, what is really important here. And a phrase I like to use, if your seller had a magic wand and they could have any offer that they wanted, what would it look like? Okay, this is where they'll tell you, we really want this price. We don't want to do any seller concessions. We want you to waive the inspection. Or, hey, you know what? We really need a longer closing time frame, or we need a shorter closing time frame. But your goal with this phone call is to make a friend. All right. Sometimes we see that agents can get a little bit adversarial with the person on the other side. It doesn't have to be adversarial. If you make a friend with the listing broker, they are much more likely to advocate for your offer and much more likely to want to work with you when they're presenting multiple offers to the seller. And you really want to show the listing agent how great you are going to be to work with. Okay. And I forgot to mention, as we're going along, if you guys have questions or you want to add anything or need additional clarification, feel free to put notes in the chat. Or, of course, you can unmute yourself, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as we go along. And I did put the slides in the chat, so if you guys see those, you can download a copy of the PDF of all of these slides. So forgot to mention that earlier. All right, so next step, your cover letter. All right, this is the cover letter from you, the buyer's agent, to the listing broker. And you want to write this and assume that the listing broker and the seller are going to read it. How often have you gotten an offer over and you just forward it directly to the seller? Pretty often, right? So you want to assume that the listing broker and the seller are both going to read it. And what you want to do is really explain the details of the offer in an outline. Hey, we're offering this price. Here's why. We're asking for these concessions. Here's why. We're closing on such and such day. Here's why. We've got this contract acceptance deadline. You asked for 48 hours. We wanted to give you plenty of time. So we put it at 48 hours. You said you wanted to make a decision quickly. So we put it at 4 hours, right? This is where you're going to explain the details in that outline. And then also explain what you're sending. All right. Hey, here's my pre-approval letter. Here's my proof of funds, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Here's other information. For example, we've already signed the lead-based paint disclosure, just as an example. We're including these things to make this easy for you, Mr. and Mrs. Listing Agent. And what you really want to communicate is that you are going to be really easy to work with and you look forward to a smooth transaction. I think we can all agree we've all had bumpy and rough transactions, and smooth transactions are a heck of a lot better. And if you can convey that to the listing broker and convey that to the seller, they're going to be much more likely to take your offer because they want to work with somebody who's going to be easy and smooth to work with. So really important in this cover letter to make sure you're conveying that. The next thing you want to do is you want to use the path of least resistance. All right? What I mean by this is you want to make it easy for the other side to work with you, and you want to show them that you and the buyer are easy to work with. So for example, use online contract software, right? And this seems pretty basic in today's day and age because pretty much everybody uses CTM or .loop or DocuSign, but not everybody does, all right? And so something that I've actually seen agents do that can be really beneficial is, hey, I use CTM and I call Jerrod and say, hey, I want to submit this offer over. And he says, I've got a seller who's not really good with technology. Would you be able to send that over or maybe drop a copy of it off to my office? That way I can take it over to the seller. Seems kind of hokey, but you know what? Yeah. If you want me to print it out and bring it over to you, I am happy to. If you want me to email it, I am happy to. I want to make it easy for you, Mr. and Mrs. Listing Agent, to pick my offer. So what is the path of least resistance that's going to be easiest for you? The next thing, be available to answer the phone. It surprises me every single month how many agents don't answer the phone, right? So they submit an offer and then the listing agent calls them back. They can't get them on the phone. They're texting, they're emailing. And if you're not easy to communicate with, it makes it more likely that the seller or the listing broker is going to go to the next offer. Okay, so make sure you're available. And then let them know when you're sending over the offer. So a lot of times people will just hit send on the email and they don't follow up. And maybe that email gets there, maybe it doesn't. So what you should do is send that email and then call. Hey, Jerrod, I sent you an email just 2 or 3 minutes ago. I know you said you're going to be meeting with your seller later today, but I just wanted to make sure, did you get the email? Do you have the offer, right? And then make sure you're sending it to the correct email. Or you know what? I saw one recently where they wanted it faxed over. No problem, right? But don't just send it and then assume that they got it. Send it to the right place. If they want fax, no problem. Go online, figure out how to fax it, right? If they want you to deliver it in person, do that too. Whatever makes the most sense to show that you're going to be easy to work with and you're going to comply with the way they want to do business. Next thing, buyer love letter. Anybody ever written one of these?
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So these can be excellent. All right. So I always recommend including a love letter from the buyer to the sellers. Now, a lot of people say these are illegal. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's perfectly legal for the buyer to write a letter to the seller. Now, the seller cannot make a decision based on a protected class. They can't make a decision based on race, religion, family status. The seller can't say, oh, you know what? I don't want them to buy this home because they have 4 kids. Well, that's a violation of fair housing. All right. But it is not a problem for the buyer to write a letter focusing on the home, focusing on the transaction, things like that. So you could write a letter that says, Mr. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I noticed that you're an avid gardener and you've done fantastic work in the backyard. I love to garden as well. I'm really excited to purchase your home and grow, I don't know, roses, right? So you can have some things that are personal and focused on the property that convey your interest and your excitement about it, okay? Now let's see, I saw a couple questions pop up here. If the listing agent specifically states no love letters, that request should be respected. Yeah, absolutely. That goes back to path of least resistance, right? So if they say, hey, we don't want any love letters or we don't want this or that, okay, no problem. And I know you guys probably see that on a regular basis, but I do still see that these love letters work. And I hear people at closing say, you know what, we really liked the letter that we got from the buyer. That's why we picked them, right? You could also include photos of the buyer. You know, back to what we were talking about earlier. If you're a gardener, as our example, hey, here's me with my prized, I don't know, chrysanthemums that I grew, right? Or whatever, if it's okay with the buyer. And another thing that I've seen be really effective is a video message from the buyer. I've seen agents do this where you go into the showing, you look around, you're like, holy cow, this is the house we want to buy. When they walk out front, they stop and they take a video of the buyer in front of the property saying, we love this about the property. We love that about the property. We love this area. We're so excited to live here. Please pick our offer. Here's why we have a really great offer. So those video messages, again, while it seems hokey, it can make a difference because the point is to pull on the attention of the seller and get them to pick our offer, okay? So next things, proof of funds, all right? If you're buying with cash, include the source of funds showing the full amount necessary for the purchase. Okay, this is one that we get at least 20 transactions under contract a year by simply including a proof of funds. All right. Now, if you're not paying with cash and you're getting a loan, number one, you're going to have that pre-approval letter. Number two, you want to include a copy of the down payment showing that source of funds, showing that you have the full down payment already in the bank. So let's say we have a $600,000 purchase price and we're putting 10% down. Well, you've got that pre-approval letter for $540,000, but where's that other $60,000 coming from? I would include a bank statement showing that we have $60,000 in the bank in the borrower's name. This is really important. Don't send over grandma's bank statement. Don't say, hey, we're waiting on a bonus from work. Don't say, hey, we're hoping to get a gift from my mom, right? Proof of funds is exactly that. It's a proof that you have the funds and they are ready to be used for the down payment. And this is one that you can include with the initial offer. Here's my contract to buy and sell. Here's my pre-approval letter. Here's my proof of funds. Here's my cover letter. Here's my buyer love letter. If you got an offer that had all of these things, is that going to begin to stand out compared to some of the other offers that you receive? I'm going to say probably yes. Now, the next thing, as you're getting ready to submit that offer, I guess right as you submit that offer, copy the lender, all right? And this is something that I do all day, every day, is I proactively call the listing broker and introduce myself. And what I do is I explain the buyer's qualifications. You know what, Mr. Buyer is purchasing with a 10% down. They've got great credit, great income. We have fully pre-approved this buyer. They are super easy to work with. They've been very responsive. This is my opportunity to share and give a third-party referral to the listing broker about what a great buyer this is. All right. And the next thing I can do is talk about my experience with the agent. I've closed 10 plus transactions with them. I've been working with them for a number of years, whatever it might be. So I'm going to pick on Anita because she and I have a transaction right now. She copied me when she sent over the offer on a transaction a couple weeks ago. As soon as I get that, right, I see it comes from CTM. I see that, I open the offer, I open up the buyer's application. I go down to the bottom of the offer. I call the listing agent and say, hi, Mrs. Listing Agent, it's Joe Massey. You should have just gotten an offer over from Anita on 123 Main Street. Did you get that? Yeah, I sure did. I didn't have a chance to look at it yet. Hey, that's okay. I know you're busy. I just wanted to call and introduce myself because I'm the buyer that has I'm the lender that has pre-approved these buyers, and I want to answer any questions that you have. And then we talk about the pre-approval. And then I can talk about, hey, I've closed half a dozen transactions with Anita in the past year. She is outstanding. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's great to communicate with. So this is the opportunity that I can tell the listing agent how great the buyer is and how great you are. So make sure you're copying the lender on that, and make sure you talk with the lender. And if they don't do these proactive calls, that might be kind of a red flag. So this is something that we do a lot, and it works really, really well.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Anita. You always do a really good job, and you always copy me on it. It's easy when you do it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next one. Now we're going to talk about, this is funny, right? We're all the way here to steps number 9 and 10, and we haven't even talked about the contract yet. So what we've been doing is laying the foundation, and now we're going to talk about your actual purchase contract. Now, again, I'm not a real estate agent. This is not Eric Romero's contract class. This is strategies. Talk to Eric, talk to your managing broker for the specifics on how to do this in the contract, but these are strategies that I see that work. So number 1, structure it so it's easy to see what's going on. What I mean by that is if we've got a lot of moving parts and pieces, that can be really confusing. So maybe you want to have it real simple. Hey, this is our price. These are the seller concessions we're asking. Here's our stuff and additional provisions. Sometimes I'll see price and then no seller concessions, and then down in additional provisions, we're asking for seller concessions. Use the fields that are already pre-populated to ask for the things that you want to. The next one, group your dates together whenever possible. So this one we'll see a lot. We'll see you've got your inspection dates, you've got your appraisal dates, you've got your loan termination dates, you've got your HOA due diligence documents dates, you've got your ILC and survey date, you've got the property insurance date. If you've got certain things that you're not super worried about, move them all to the same time frame. So some examples might be, we want all the HOA documents by 7 days. We're going to verify insurance on the property by 7 days. We're going to verify all the due diligence documents by 7 days, right? Put some of these things together so you don't have these dates kind of hanging out there. Now, obviously the big ones are inspection, appraisal, and loan termination. Those are going to be spread out, but other ones that you can move up forward into the contract, move those all at the same time if you can. And then minimize the seller work. For example, due diligence documents. I saw one recently where under the due diligence, they asked for copies of the manuals for every appliance in the house. Now, in my experience, when I buy a microwave, where does the manual go? In the trash, right? Now, you might have manuals for the refrigerator, the stove, things like that. But if we're trying to sell a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 home, a copy of the microwave manual is not going to be the make or break detail that I'm going to be reading to determine whether or not I want to buy the home. So don't ask for things that are really not critical. If I'm a seller and I have 2 identical offers, and one of those offers is asking me for the microwave manual and a copy of, how the furnace works, and the other one is not asking for that, guess who I'm more interested in? The ones that are following the path of least resistance. Now, that doesn't mean don't ask for appropriate documentation. If they say in there, hey, the roof was recently replaced and we added a 500 square foot ensuite, primary bedroom to the back of the home. Okay, great. We would really like to see the roof replacement certificate, and we'd really like to see the permits from the county. So ask for things that are appropriate, but don't go overboard. And don't ask for unnecessary information. For example, if there's no HOA, don't ask for HOA documents. That just makes you look like an amateur, right? So if there's no HOA, leave that section blank or put in NA. Now, another one that we are seeing come back is escalation clauses. These can be really, really good, but they can also have some downsides to them. So an escalation clause is, hey, the purchase price or the list price is $500. We're going to offer $510. But if you have any other offers, we're going to go up and offer $1,000 above any other offers, up to a cap of $525,000. Now, it seems great that if they don't have any other offers, our offer is $510, right? But if they have another offer for $515, we're offering $516. But here's the challenge. A, the listing agent and the seller are not required to share those offers with you. And B, you put in there, hey, we're going to go up to an escalation clause of $525. They could simply come back and counter and say, oh, you're willing to offer up to $525? Our counter offer is $525,000, and we're going to just remove the escalation provisions. Okay, so there's pros and cons to it. I've had a lot of contracts a lot of properties get under contract using escalation clauses. I've also seen it, bite people in the butt from time to time where they will get countered at that top end cap price. So just understand there's pros and cons to it and have those conversations with your buyers. Now, next one. Oh, let's see. We had a comment about... Oh yeah, Anita said, I asked the listing agent in the original pre-offer call if they're comfortable with escalation clauses. I completely agree with that, right? If they don't like escalation clauses, just put your best offer forward. If you say, hey, we want the property, but we don't want to overpay, maybe they've got a seller that's going to understand that. So I think that's really smart, is have that conversation. Now, we touched on this in the last slide. Move all buyer dates up as soon as possible. Things like insurance, inspection, even the appraisal. And we'll talk about appraisal here in a few minutes, but you can absolutely move these sooner into the transaction and remove some of that uncertainty. Another one I really like, higher earnest money. So I got some properties under contract last year, and it was relatively small. It was a $210,000 purchase price, and I offered $50,000 in earnest money. Now, what were they asking for in the MLS? $1,000. Now I said, hey, I'll give you $50,000 in earnest money. That got their attention. They had 6 other offers, and they came back to me and said, hey, we love that you're really serious about this, and we're going to put down more earnest money. We're going to take your offer. Now, let me ask you guys, was I at any more risk by putting down $50,000 of earnest money versus $1,000? No. I still had all my termination dates and deadlines in the contract, okay? So that's one that can really get attention. Now, the next one, you need to use a real estate attorney to structure this. But this is one that we've used a number of times. You can release the earnest money or a part of the earnest money early. Now, here's how you can use this. Let's say we have a seller that is an estate. And so someone has passed away. The property is now in the name of the estate, and you've got an adult son or daughter or family that is working through the disposition of this. Oftentimes in estate sales, the money has often run out of the estate. So they can't make any repairs. They can't do anything to the property. They're running low on cash. And the final step is to sell this property. And so you might say, you know what? If you accept our offer, we're going to put down $25,000 of earnest money. We're going to release that to the seller within 48 hours of contract acceptance. Now, if I've got an estate and I have a 30-day contract and they're looking at a bunch of different offers, if in my offer, they're going to get $25,000 in 48 hours, and then they're going to get the rest at the closing date in 30 days, does that suddenly get attention? Yes, it certainly does. Now, I wouldn't recommend this for every single buyer. I would recommend this for folks that are really experienced, that understand what they're buying, that they're comfortable taking a little bit of risk. This works great for cash transactions. Also works great, again, in estate sales or maybe divorce situations where the folks that are selling the property need some access to funds right away. So one of my other favorites, specific performance. So this is in the contract. In general, Jerrod, I'll pick on you. What is most commonly selected on specific performance? Does most people select specific performance or liquidated damages?
Liquidated damages.
That's right. If I'm the buyer and I've selected liquidated damages and I default on the contract, the only thing I have at risk is my earnest money. If I'm the buyer and I select specific performance, what I have at risk is my earnest money, and the seller can sue me for damages. What do most people think that specific performance actually means, though? What do you guys think? Most people think, say it, Jerrod?
Yeah, I was just saying, they think it's the earnest money.
Yeah. Most people think that when a buyer checks specific performance, that it means I'm absolutely going to perform on this contract and absolutely going to buy it. It doesn't mean that. All right. What it means is I still have all my dates and deadlines and outs. And if I default on the contract as the buyer, the seller has the opportunity to sue me. But if I don't default and I cancel on inspection or I cancel on appraisal, it cancels just like any other regular contract. So there's a lot of misinformation around this. And this is one of my favorite tricks that I use whenever I'm buying properties for my own individual portfolio is check specific performance, because generally on the other side, the listing agent doesn't understand what it means. And certainly the seller almost always doesn't understand what it means. And they see that it's very, very serious. And it says we are going to specifically perform on this contract, and that's what we're going to do. And it rises the certainty of that contract. So the next thing, you can put a provision in there that, hey, if we go under contract before the listing broker deadline, we'll give you more money. So I used this on a transaction in my personal portfolio last year. It was another smaller, I think it was a $235,000 condo. And so I saw the property on a Thursday, and I called my agent and said, all right, I definitely want to buy this. Send over an offer for $235, and let's see if we can get it under contract. So he sent over the offer. Listing agent called back and they said, we have an open house this weekend, and right now we have 35 showings scheduled. We think we want to wait through the weekend and see what happens. My agent called me back and told me that. I said, okay. I said, call him back and tell them we'll give them $245, so $10,000 more, if they accept our offer by 6 p.m. on Friday, and they cancel all the rest of the showings, and they cancel the open house. Anybody want to guess what happened? They took that offer, canceled the open house, canceled all the other showings. All it cost me was $10,000, and I was able to get that property under contract before 35 other people went in there and bid it up. Okay, so that's a strategy that you can use that is really, really effective. And similar to that, offer a higher price if accepted sooner. Okay, these two kind of go together. And then one of my other favorites, an unusual offer price. Okay, an unusual offer price. So let's say the seller has 5 offers. One's at 530, 535, 530, 537. And then you've got one at 534, 597. They've got all these offers laid out. They're going to stop and look at this and they're going to say, how did you come up with that offer price? And then the listing agent is going to call the buyer's agent and say, hey, we got your offer. This is really unique. How did you get that? And it elicits a conversation. And you can say, hey, we just wanted to make sure that our offer floated to the top. What are the things that you like or dislike about our offer that maybe we can adjust to see about purchasing this property? So this unusual offer price is one of my favorites. I would highly, highly recommend that because it doesn't cost you that much money to add $97 or $42 or whatever it might be to get their attention. All right. Make sure you are using and selecting in the contract the best financing terms. All right. You only want to check the best payment option that is available. So I see this happen a lot in contracts where on the contract section, they've selected cash, conventional, FHA, and VA. Now, don't include these multiple loan types unless you are unsure. This is a real contract from about 6 months ago. Conventional, FHA, VA, bond, and other down payment assistance. If I'm the seller, how are they getting the money to buy this property? Who knows, right? This indicates to me uncertainty. It signifies to the seller that the buyer has not figured out how to qualify for the loan. So guess what I'm doing? I'm going to the next offer. So I say that, and I will tell you from time to time, I see this. Conventional and FHA. And then these would be blank. Now, why might a buyer do that? Jerrod, any guesses?
They don't want to. Well, one is they don't know whether or not they're going to do as far as their down payment. It's because you're like, all right, can I do a 3% down? Can I do a 5% down? Can I do a 3.25% down with the FHA? So they're trying to figure out which one they can get away with. And then secondly is all right, even though it's not as prevalent today as it was in the past with FHA deals and the conditions of the house. Agents are always get scared of FHA deals, which,
So you might select both, particularly if a property might need some renovations. So
Yep.
here's a conversation you might have. Hey, you know what? My buyer has 10% to put down, Mr. and Mrs. Listing Agent, but we've checked conventional and we've checked FHA. You'll notice that we've waived our right to object on inspection, but we've selected both loan options because when we do the inspection, we're not going to ask your seller to fix anything. But if we do find some things that need to be fixed, we want to have the flexibility to change over to an FHA loan and put less money down so they can keep some additional cash in the bank to do those renovations after the closing. So this is something that if you were to decide to do that, include it in your cover letter and be really clear about why you're doing that. And again, have that phone call and that conversation with the listing agent on why you decided to do it that way. But don't do this. Don't just check all of these boxes for everything. That's just signifying to the seller, we don't know what we're doing. We just hope you take our offer. And if they've got 10 other offers, they're not going to go with the one where you don't know what you're doing. So next one, inspection. All right. You can absolutely waive this contingency in the contract. You can say, hey, we're not even going to do an inspection, but you need to advise the client. And I think we've got some, notification of risks to buyer forms that we use. You need to advise the client of the risks of doing this. Or you could limit inspection items to a very specific dollar amount or to specific systems. And we've got a little asterisk here because we see this come up a lot. Be specific. Don't say health and safety items only, because that is up for debate and creates issues depending on the definition of health and safety. So I saw one not too long ago and they had this, hey, we're only going to inspect based on health and safety items. And the inspection resolution came over and they were asking for new screens on the windows. Does that sound like a health and safety item?
Nope.
It doesn't. Here's how they justified it. My buyer has allergies and often has indoor allergies and often likes to open up all of the windows to make sure that air is flowing through the house to help her allergies. And so that's a health issue and we need new window screens. Now, that's an extreme example, but it is a real example. So instead of saying we're going to limit to health and safety items, you might say things like we're going to limit to the HVAC system. We're going to limit our inspection to the furnace, to the sewer line, to the roof, to very specific systems. Because if you say and have ambiguity in the contract under things like health and safety, that's really up for debate and then can create issues when you get to the inspection objection portion of your negotiations.
Hey, Joe.
Yes, sir.
I got one other tip that I like to see also is in the inspection. So it's section 10.3. You have your inspection objection deadline, inspection termination deadline, and then inspection resolution deadline. And what you do is basically leave the objection and the resolution non-applicable. Stick your termination date in there 6 days after mutual agreement. And it doesn't let the buyer, basically it shows you, hey, we're real serious. We want this property. You still have the right to terminate because of it, but you can just sit there and say, hey, we're going to terminate because of this. If you think there's a way we can come to a meeting of the minds on it without quote unquote terminating because of the inspection, you're still able to get your deal and it looks a little cleaner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. That's something I do a lot is I will waive my inspection objection, but I will still have a termination right. And that way they know we're not going to come back and ask them to fix the doorknob, right? But if we find a massive problem, we just say, hey, we're just terminating. We're not going to do anything. And guess what happens? They always call and they're like, why are you terminating? Wait, we really want to sell you the house. Well, we found some problems with the property. We'll fix everything. Okay, cool. And then you can have a conversation. Next, let's talk about the appraisal. So can you waive your appraisal contingency if you are getting a loan? What do you guys think? Miranda says no. Jerrod says yes.
You can, but you better be ready to make up any difference.
Anita's exactly right. You absolutely, even if you're working with me and your buyer's getting a new loan, you absolutely can waive your appraisal contingency. Now, we're still going to do an appraisal, right? If one is required, if they need that to qualify for the loan, we're going to do it, but your contingency is waiving the right to cancel if they don't like the value, okay? There's also options for the right property or the right client. You can completely waive the appraisal and say, hey, we don't even need one, all right? Appraisal waivers are really common. I'm doing one right now for one of my buyers. He's putting 25% down. They don't even need an appraisal, right? Now, it doesn't happen all the time. Depends on the client, their credit, their income, the property, how much money they're putting down, lots of variables, but you can plug that in. Hey, we don't need an appraisal. We're taking out that contingency. Now, here's another one, which is one of my favorites. I actually did this on my personal home, what would it have been, 2018, so 6 years ago. Complete the appraisal before the inspection. Mr. Seller, we know that everyone is worried about the value of the home. So what we're going to do is order the appraisal immediately. We're going to pay a rush fee to make sure we have it back within 3 days. This way we can remove that concern for you and for the buyers. And after that, we've all agreed upon the value. Then we're going to complete our inspection and review any concerns with the property. How does that sound to you, Mr. Seller and Mr. Seller's agent? Do you guys think that's a good idea? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. This is the way I purchased my property. When was it? 2018. I actually did one of these others right here, actually, that we're going to talk about. The next thing you can do is an appraisal gap. The buyer pays the difference between the appraised value and the contract price, or some dollar amount between. And yes, you absolutely can do this on FHA and VA transactions. Now, it's not enforceable. You cannot force the client to do it, but you absolutely can do it, where you say, hey, we're going to offer $600,000. If the value comes in $25,000 less or anywhere in between, we're going to pay up to $25,000 difference to make up that gap. You can absolutely do that on conventional, FHA, or VA. And one of my favorites is a TBD price. The buyer agrees to increase the price of the property if it appraises for more than the purchase price. Now, you need to be careful with this one, right? You need to be careful. But here's how I purchased my home a couple years ago, and it's exactly what we talked about here. We ordered the appraisal before the inspection, and we said, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we want to order the appraisal right away. We're offering you, I think we offered them $550. I don't remember exactly what we offered, but I think we offered $550 on the property. And we said, we're going to order the appraisal, and if the value comes in greater than $550, we're going to increase the price to whatever the appraised value is. Because what does every seller think the home is worth? Like $1 billion. What does every buyer think it's worth? Like $1. What's it actually worth? Somewhere pretty close to the list price, all right? But this is one that you can use, but you have to understand if the value comes in higher, you do have to increase that price, but 80% of the time, the value comes in at the contract price. So you have an 80% chance that you are not going to increase the price. However, 17% of the time, the value does come in higher, so you have a 17% chance that the price may be higher. So for an aggressive buyer that really wants the property, this is a great strategy. And it's, again, one that I used personally to buy my home a few years ago. Now, the next one, leaseback and timing. Be flexible with your closing dates. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we can close whenever it works for you. The fastest closing may not be the most beneficial for the seller. Sometimes they want a longer closing. Also, you can do a seller leaseback or a post-close occupancy and be flexible with the moving dates and timelines. Make sure you're cautious of your loan deadlines, insurance deadlines, and closing dates. But if they need an extra 30 days, hey, we're under contract, we're ready to close, and they say, oh, you know what? We really need more time because our new build property is not complete yet. No problem. We don't want to create waves and have this property go back on the market. Feel free. You're welcome to move everything out in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, right? Be easy to work with. You can also include seller conditional sale language. So a lot of times you will have people that say, I really want to sell my home, but I don't have a place to go yet. And so then you're in this contingent buy sale deal. Well, you can write your offer and you can say, you know what, we're going to give you an offer, but we're going to give the seller an out that if they can't find a replacement property, they can cancel on this transaction. right? And so you've got some verbiage in here that I believe is in the Your Castle package is where we got this from, but it states that if the seller cannot find a replacement property, the seller has an opportunity to cancel. Now, you want to, of course, have your real estate attorney and or managing broker review this and approve it before using it, but this is one that we've had a ton of success with.
I love that.
Yeah, it works great.
That's amazing.
Now, one of my other favorites is backup offers. And Jerrod, you see this a lot. How many transactions are canceling right now? You see a lot of title orders. What percentage of properties cancel on the initial contract?
We're at like 23, 24%.
Yep. Now, why does it happen?
I just get cold feet.
Yeah. A lot of buyers are getting cold feet right now. So let's say we submit an offer and they call us and say, hey, you know, you were in our top 3, but we picked somebody else. Okay, we're going to submit a backup offer because if I know that I've got to go out and look at another 5, 10, 15 properties, I also have low odds of getting those under contract. But if I know that right now 23% of contracts are canceling and I have a backup, guess what? I have a 23% chance of getting that property. All right. Make sure you're doing a written backup, not a verbal. I hear this all the time. Yeah, you'll be our backup. If something goes wrong, we'll call you. Get it in writing. And I believe Eric has a class on this, and you can explain the value to the real estate, to the listing agent, and explain the benefits to the buyer. This gives the listing agent a lot of negotiation power on the inspection. So backup offers can be a great way to get under contract when you're in a really competitive market. And number 21.
And it doesn't stop the buyer from still searching for the right house.
That's exactly right. The buyer can still go out and get under contract on another property. They find another property, you just cancel the backup offer.
Yep.
Next one, aged listings. All right. And I think these get missed a lot. These are where I love to go find investment properties. Look at listings that are more than 15, 30, or 45 days old. Now, they might not be the primo listings, but these listings are likely overpriced and your buyers likely have a chance. So these are great options if you're using CHFA, down payment assistance, or any other grant programs. And this is where you're going to have your best opportunity to get seller paid closing costs. Now, you might need to write a solid cover letter explaining your price methodology to the seller and the agent, right? Because, hey, the property is overpriced. Here's our offer. Here's why we're coming in at this lower price because you've been on the market for 45 days or 60 days or whatever. And a real simple strategy, make your offers on day 13, 28, 43, or 58. Because what's happening on those days? The listing agent is talking to the seller about why they need to have a price reduction. And really what's happening here at day 58, the listing agent and the seller hate each other. Right? They hate each other because the listing agent wants the price to go down. The seller wants the price to go up. You ride in on your white horse and you say, here's my offer. It's $25,000 below. Here's all the reasons why we looked at the comparables and came up with this price. Now the listing agent is going to take that to the seller and say, hey, I've been talking to you that we needed to reduce the price by $15,000. Look at this. We're right in the ballpark that we've got a price reduction or we've got an offer $25,000 below. Let's counter it and let's get under contract because right here from day 58 to 60, everybody on the seller side hates everybody else. And this is your opportunity that you can get really, really good deals. So this is right here. This is where I look for investment properties, days 45 to 60 or greater, right? Sometimes you will see things out there 75, 90 days. So
that's the tip of the day.
That is the tip of the day. And they're out
Yep.
there. Everybody says nothing's on the market.
Yep.
Not true. I see a lot of age listings out there.
Yep.
And one bonus for you guys, new builds, right? I think we often forget there is more inventory available. We have a lot of flexibility for longer timelines, and new builds are much more likely to take a contingent offer. So before we wrap up, at the very back of the PDF is this 21-point checklist. So you can print out the PDF that we sent you and you can go through when you're talking to your buyers and you can check off, all right, we did our buyer interview. You got pre-approved. I'm going to reach out to the listing agent. We've got a detailed cover letter. We're going to use the path of least resistance. Hey, we're not going to do a love letter because we don't like the way it feels. Cool. Give me your source of funds. Great. Joe's going to call and introduce himself. We've written a clean, easy to read contract. We don't like an escalation clause. We're going to have early buyer termination dates. We don't have enough to offer higher earnest money. We're too nervous to do specific performance, but we are going to offer an unusual offer price. We're going to present our best financing terms. We're not going to have a limited inspection. We're not going to have a limited appraisal, but we are going to pay for an appraisal gap. And we've got some closing date flexibility, and we're willing to offer that lease back. And if this doesn't work out, we're going to look at a backup offer or at aged listings. So you guys can print this out, include it with your buyer's packet, include it as a guideline or a template when you're going through your conversations, and cover all of these with your buyers. So any final questions, guys? Anything that I can answer for any of you? Jerrod, your last slide, and then I'll wrap us up. Why should we talk to you? Why should we call you over at First Alliance Title?
Guys, like I said, I've been in this business for 30 years, was you, for 22 years. Been a real estate investor from the time I was 23 years old. So there's not much I haven't seen in this business. So I'd love to sit down and just, again, help you look at your business and see where I can give you some advice to help you grow and hopefully increase your commission. So reach out to me.
Absolutely. And then again, what do? I do everything that we've talked about today: conventional loans, FHA loans, VA, USDA, jumbo, investment cash flow loans, purchases, refinances, primary residence, second homes, investment properties. Many of you here are on the call, have worked with me in the past. We have our 8-day rush service. Our average clear to close is 21 days. Our 100% pre-approval track record. We do a lot of work with HomeBot to help you work with your database. We've got, of course, our e-flyers and websites that you can use to market your listings, and everything we're talking about today, our classes, mostly online these days. We're not having as many people drive all the way to the office, but please, wherever you learned about this, make sure you continue to stay on that email list, because we will always send out these classes. And that is everything I wanted to cover. Any final questions that anybody has?
Joe, I just want to say my clients appreciate your buy down and refinance programs.
Oh, good, good. That makes me really happy. Thank you. Yeah, we've got, for those of you that aren't familiar, right now, any of our clients that go under contract are getting a free 1-year interest rate buy down. So if their rate is, let's say, 6.8%, for the first year, we give them a rate of 5.8%. And then we also give them a voucher that they can refinance with no closing costs at any point in the future. So Anita, thank you for that. I'm glad those folks like that. That makes me happy. Okay.
I have a question for you. So you were talking about pre-approval and pre-qualification, and I'm just curious from a lender's, if we get a pre-approval letter saying the desktop underwriting buyer's been pre-approved, should we assume that that lender has actually gotten written documentation on debt, income, assets?
I would ask them. So for us, I can't speak to other lenders. I can tell you what we do is I do not give out a pre-approval unless we have all of that written information and we have completely underwritten that loan. So sometimes somebody will say, hey, I sent you one paycheck stub and one W-2, and I'm going to send you my tax returns in a few days. Can you send me a pre-approval? I'm sorry, I can't, right? Because there might be something on those tax returns, and that pre-approval is my statement that you truly are good to buy this property at this price range. So is it reasonable to assume that they've gotten that information? Yes, but I would ask, because there are lenders that say, oh yeah, you're pre-approved, go for it. And the client may not actually be pre-approved. And we see that, I don't know if you know this statistic, but 22% of the time, not with us, but as an industry, 22% of the time clients are turned down by their lender after being pre-approved and after going under contract. So that's something that can be a problem. And so that's why I focus on our 100% pre-approval track record, that we don't give out that pre-approval unless we know that client really is pre-approved.
It's pre-approved. So a desktop underwriting approval, don't assume, that could just be something that the lender took the information verbally, did not verify anything, but still is providing a pre-approval letter.
Yep.
Saying it's been desktop underwritten.
I could type in that the client makes $1 million a year and get a desktop approval, right? If we haven't actually seen it and we haven't actually underwritten the loan, it's not accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because that's a big one. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, any final questions for myself or for Jerrod? All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks for joining
We will
us, guys.
see you guys at the next class, and thank you very much. And appreciate all of you guys making the time. We will see you guys in the future, and call myself or Jerrod if we can do anything for you.
Thank you.
Great day, everybody.
Thanks, guys.